Hello and welcome, everyone. We are glad to have you here with us again on this wonderful and amazing Thursday night. We are grateful to you for always showing up on this call. My name is Roma. I'm the customer service and sales team lead at Highland Park Lapidary. And I wanted to officially welcome you to our 45th Highland Park live interactive webinar. This is the place where we share our knowledge, answer questions, and get tips and tricks all about the lapidary art. And before we proceed, let me know who are new to this call by typing new on the chat so we can welcome you. The chat box can be found at the bottom part of your Zoom. Yeah. Hi, Ed. Hello again, Ed. Ramsdale, thank you for showing up. And also, of course, let's not forget our customers and followers that are also streaming with us live, both on our Facebook and YouTube channel. Thank you for always tuning in with us. And I know everyone is excited for tonight's topic, which is the continuation of the art of gemstone faceting with our guest speaker, Justin K. Prim. He's an American lapidary and gemologist living in and working in Bangkok, Thailand. He has studied gem cutting traditions all over the world, as well as attending gemology programs at GIA and AIGS, on which he also teach gemology and gem cutting at AIGS and IGT in Bangkok, and has recently published his first book, The Secret Teachings of Gem Cutting. He is the founder of Fasting Apprentice, an online gem cutting school, and he also writes articles, produces videos, and gives talks about gem cutting history. And if you have any questions during the webinar, please type them in into the chat window or raise your hand by going to the reaction icon at the bottom part of the Zoom and click raise hand. We will address them during the Q&A portion. Now, without further ado, let's welcome our General Manager Sherman Rowland together with Justin to kick off our 45th live interactive webinar with our intro video.
Welcome all of you. Some of you, I had a couple of people connect with me saying, hey, I can't be on the Zoom call this time, but can I get it on YouTube? Because they're really wanting to follow what Justin said. I'm like, yes, it'll be going up on YouTube. And I want to thank you, Justin, for being here as we're getting into the holiday season. I think you ultimately have the most badass faceting setup there with the fireplace, your tools. I mean, that doesn't look like you're suffering.
I think from the last time that we did this, which was just a couple weeks ago, I went from the opposite extremes. I was in like a house with no heat, with like a room with no heat, to a room with the fireplace, and it's cozy.
Yeah,
so
that's awesome.
Perfect.
Awesome. One of the things I also just want to share, and we'll talk about this later, but you know, Justin, when Justin did his first webinar with us, you mentioned your book, and I'm like, I got to get that book. And I bought your book. I've got it right here.
Thank you.
look how this book is ridiculous. It is loaded with so much detail about faceting. I was blown away, Justin, because I expected it would be like, you know, sometimes you'll see a book that's in the gemstone cutting and polishing thing, and it's kind of nice, but you're giving not only history in here, but you're giving all kinds of detail. Like I could use this as really a reference book for doing so many different cutting of different designs. It's all in here.
Yeah.
Like, and you don't have to go online. You don't have to go look at things. Like this book is like, I suspect, I'm not a faceter, but I suspect this will become like one of those go-to Bibles that people are like, let me go grab that. I'm going to make that particular cut.
That was definitely in my dream of the book. You know, I was thinking about the book for a while before we started it, because I had all those designs for a couple of years. And I was like, okay, 50 designs, it's like 50 pages. That's not a book, you know, and I needed like this one little key that somebody in Bangkok gave me. I was having dinner with like a guy who runs a gem cutting factory, but he also has this really wonderful restaurant that we eat at a lot in Bangkok. And he was like, yeah, you need to do like a deep version and a shallow version. And then you can give us some different options for the different cuts. And that like clicked it in my head. And I was like, oh, you know, like 50 designs becomes like 100 pages. But then with the photo and everything, it becomes 200 pages. And then it just spiraled from there. And then I was like, okay, 230 pages or whatever, like that's a book. That's a good book.
Yeah.
And
well, one of the things about that is like, I'm new to faceting. And as I've been reading it, my confidence that I could learn this just from reading the book has substantially, you know, risen, because I'm like, okay, I need to choose the right material. I need to, like, there's the mechanics, but then you're giving so much detail of what are all the cuts. Combine that with your school, because I think you also do an online school, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, to me, my confidence level is like, I could do this thing. So now I just need to get John to finish faceting machines, and then we'll be good.
No, I think anybody can do it. I mean, some people who, especially people who are coming from the world of cabbing, sometimes they see faceting and they're like, ooh, really intimidating. There's like some kind of math involved. It's so crazy because they see a design full of numbers and it looks like math. But when you actually really sit down and do it, you're like, oh, there's literally no math. Like it's just pattern making, really. It's nothing complicated at all. And once you do one stone, you completely understand what's going on, or at least you generally have understanding. And you're like, oh yeah, that's not hard at all. It's not any harder than, you know, like painting by numbers doesn't have any math involved, but there's numbers everywhere, right? And it's not, you know, it's not that different. So yeah, I think anyone could do it if they want to, if you have time, I guess.
Well, and I know last time we spoke about the different styles of machines, the Mast style machine, and then here you have this machine where you're holding the whole head, like, well, lift that up.
Yeah, exactly.
So to me, this almost feels less intimidating because I like it. It just feels like I got this. I set the angle and then I work it, and then I go to the next, you know, change. Go to the next angle or whatever it is, and I do the same thing. Do you think there is like a difference in terms of a learning curve on what's the faster learning curve, or is it equal between the two styles of machines?
You know, I think to flip that question around a little bit, I think once you're at an advanced level, I would say there's almost no difference in what you can do on the machine. But when you're the beginner, I think it's absolutely different somehow, because as you said, this is sort of more simple than a normal American Mast faceting machine.
Right.
Technically, it has all the same controls. It has all the same functions. It's not missing anything, but the fact that it's in your hand and there's some different tactile experience that you have with this one. And I think also as you learn how to cut with this, you have this extra bonus of being able to look at the stone from any side. You know, I'm frequently tilting it up and looking forward and changing my views to make sure everything's balanced and everything. And that's something that's a little bit harder to do when the stone is fixed on this arm and you kind of have to move. You know, people are always kind of doing this, like trying to see all the, you know, all the angles and stuff. But also there's something else about this. It's sort of more sort of straightforward, I guess. Like it's in your hand and you sort of have an intuitive understanding, right? Pretty quickly, maybe not on day one, but you start to get a pretty quick understanding of how this thing moves. It has to tilt forward, it has to tilt backwards. Sometimes it tilts left and right.
Right.
And when it's in your hand, you sort of get that pretty quickly. Like my students get it within two stones, maybe 2 or 3 stones. When the thing is over here, the normal American machine, it's facing you as opposed to being in your hand. So everything is sort of coming at a different direction, and you have to get your mind working with that. I don't know if people perceive it as backwards, but it is backwards compared to this being in your hand. Forward is forward and back is back, and you understand how that works just from knowing how to write or whatever, knowing how to do things with your hands. It feels less like a machine that you're doing, that you're interacting with, and something that you're working on. It's part of you.
So when you speak about the American machine, and certainly for folks here, let me ask you just as a show of like, just put in the chat yes if you're currently you've currently facet. Just put a yes in the chat.
Oh, I'm kind of curious.
Ryan, Larry, Gary. Oh yeah, Theodore, Gail, Cassandra, Ron, Jessica.
Okay, we got a lot of facetors here. This is great.
Oh yeah. And then one stone. Yeah, you got to start with the first stone. A Mast. Oh, this is exactly what I was going to ask Theodore. So who is using Mast machines? So if you use a Mast machine, put Mast, and if you use, what would you call this as a parallel?
Handpiece.
Handpiece machine. Put handpiece. Mast.
I would assume it's going to be majority Mast or all Mast, because that's
because you can't get handpiece here, really.
Yeah, I mean, the Mast machine is the American machine, so it makes sense that everyone uses that. I'm a little bit of a okay, we got one handpiece.
Yeah.
Both. Okay, a few.
We'll touch on the digital question, Ron, as well. And team, make sure you grab those questions so that when we jump into that, we won't miss that. Yeah, Jessica's using handpiece. Brad switched to a Mast, but also handpiece. Yeah, so Gary.
So there's a few.
Yeah. And I know John and John and Gary have been also talking in collaboration stuff. Like, you know Gary?
Yeah. I can't remember if we've met in person, but I've definitely interacted online and seen him in webinars and stuff like that. So
yeah.
It's fun to kind of like see. I mean, over the COVID period, we were doing a lot of webinars, and then you start to see the same names a lot. You're like, oh man. And then somehow you start to know people. I think actually I know Gary in a different way than that, but there were a lot of people that I met via just seeing them every week in the webinar. And then suddenly I became aware of them, like, oh, cool. This person is really interested. They're here every week. It's really fun.
Another guy who's a serious guy is Don Lawford. I don't know if you don't know Don, we should definitely hook you guys up. Don has 30 faceting machines or 40, Lord knows, even a hand crank one. So he's kind of like you, like loves that and loves the technology. And he has a shop in like a facility in south of Pittsburgh. And maybe you guys also, maybe places of collaboration too. Like, I mean, part of our goal with Highland Park is connecting people together, because it's community of people that are doing together, learning together, collaboration. That's why we'll be doing more marketing education. Like we've just hired some very heavyweight expertise to help us on learning marketing better. I mean, the folks we're working with, they've done like 10-figure result campaigns. These are crazy. And then they've done small stuff, and they've done shit for like people like Gary V and others. And so we're very much like, how do we learn this? And then as we learn it, our goal is to then share that with you, so that if you're out wanting to promote yourself and learn, how do I promote what I'm doing? Like, that's a lot of what our goal is with you, Justin, is help to promote what you're doing, because in the world we live in, the best known is what matters. Not if you're the best. The best known always the one that wins. So if we can be great quality and be best known, if we can expose the largest group of people to your work, you can touch more lives. That's a, like, to us, that's an existential thing. Like, you and I are very aligned, and John, around how do we really markedly grow and increase the participation in the lapidary arts? And I think that's true for all of you that are on this call. Is we're not in the story of, this is the gemstone cutting field, this little cup here, and I have this little drop in here, and then if somebody else comes in, that means less for me. That's like crazy. It's more like, if the tides go up, more and more people know about it. I was just talking to Justin before that, like, we're looking at what are ways that we can get gemstone and glass cutting and polishing, whether it's faceting, cabbing, spheres, and get that into major mainstream media. Crystals and metaphysicals already there. You go and you watch whoever, you're going to see crystals in that. But being able to get both these key people that already a lot of the population follow, to say, hey, you know what? I love that sphere, like, as an example, and get that fascination going. Then we really bring more people into it, and we really invigorate the art, which is something I think you've done a terrific job with. So, Leslie wants to attend another workshop with you, by the way. She's in the chat. She's like, let me do it again.
Yes, let's do it again.
So talk to me. Go ahead.
I want to tell you a quick story based on what you just said, getting larger people into the cutting world. I was interviewing a guy earlier, I guess it was last year. It's a guy in San Francisco, but he's British originally. And his father was the manufacturer in England called ML Beach. This is like a company that made cabbing machines and tumblers and stuff back in the 60s and 70s. And he told me a story one time. They have a shop in London, and some security guards come in, and they're like, what's going on? And a member of the royal family came in. I forget who it was. It was like the niece of the queen or something like that. And she came in, but like a famous person that everyone in England knows. And she came in and got a tumbler. And then he was telling me that his father had a long relationship with her, as a grit supplier. And that, like, he went to a dinner that she was at. I mean, this is the son now, went to a dinner that she was at like 40 years later or something. And he didn't talk to her, but he just sort of sent a note through the valet and was like, do you remember? And she sent him a letter back and said, oh, of course, I still have the tumbler. So what a good, I mean, she didn't come out and tell the world she was tumbling, but if they would have had Instagram at that time, maybe she would have.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, and we're working on some of those, like, what are those moves that we can, and we may really be involving you, because you're a great speaker. You're very articulate, and I think you can capture people's, curiosity, because curiosity is such the thing. Like, and I think that's where TikTok and Instagram have done a great job exposing people to something they otherwise not see. Whether we like it or don't like it, like, I know, like, do you know Andres Carrillo? He's our partner. He does the mining of the Koyamito and that. And he had a video that had 2 million views. It went on TikTok. It went viral on TikTok. And he was doing core drilling, using our core drilling in that. And literally the followership of his thing blew up. A lot of more people, wanted to follow that. And then in that week of that thing going live, we sold $45,000 of equipment. Because people were like, oh, I want that. Because they didn't even know it existed. They were in the field. We oftentimes think that people know about us, but in reality, most people don't know about us. We're still obscure.
Yeah.
So I want to come back to a question that, and Matt, I got your question there, which we'll get to too. The Mast style versus the handpiece style. What briefly is the historical evolution of those two types of things, and obviously in production cutting, from what my understanding from you is largely it's hand pieces. Like, if you go Thailand and other places, they're not using Mast machines.
Right.
Can you talk a little bit about that evolution of machines and what happened there?
So this has been my big project of this year. For more than 6 months, I've been traveling across the country documenting this early history of the American way, if we want to call it that. So the Mast machine is very much an American thing. It was invented in America by Americans. The first types of American machines we see are as early as the 1890s in Maine, but the sort of the great grandfather of the ones that we use today are coming as early as like the first 10 years of 1900, like the first patents came, and I've seen photos of that. So you've got this design of like, an arm with angles and the height control and index rotation. So the Americans wanted to make a machine that they could cut stones with, but they wouldn't have to do like a 5-year apprenticeship like what happens in Europe to learn how to, have the dexterity and all the hand control to use the European jam peg style. So they wanted to do something that was really more tech. It was a machine. And if we think about that period of time, 1890, that's when electricity really started to make its way across America and across Europe. When people first got it in their shops and then later in their houses, that is exactly that period of time. So it makes sense. This is a period of huge technological innovation. Cars, eventually the radio, phonograph, telegram, stuff like that. Telegraph, I mean. So the faceting machine somehow just is part of that sort of late industrial revolution or whatever. Like,
so is it an evolution really of the jam peg? Like, if you think philosophically, did it, the jam peg machines were known, and then because that's kind of same thing, I'm downward.
The jam peg lets you have a fixed point to make an angle from, right? Like you need an angle to go and cut your stone. So the jam peg was one way of doing it. But I mean, if we look even older than the jam peg, there was something else, and I don't have anything to show, but it kind of looks like this. It's not metal and all this with all these buttons and stuff, but it was a handle that you could hold that did have this sort of angle thing, but it was wood and it was very crude. But people use that for hundreds of years because they needed some control, right?
Yeah.
Just holding it in your hand like totally free is very, very hard, like to the point of almost impossible. So America invented that thing, and that's been spreading for now 120 years or so. And there were some handpieces along the way. I mean, of course, we have some that we know of, like the Raytech Shaw, but there was some like in the 40s, and then later in the 60s, and then later in the 80s. But for whatever reason, they never really caught on that much. I mean, it wasn't the dominant style, right? It wasn't the, in the same way that when you go to Europe, there's so many tiny, tiny cars, and here there's so many giant cars, and it's just a cultural thing. It's nothing to do with the technology. It's just culture. And so here in America, we like this thing, the Mast, right? And for me too, when I started, that's what I learned on, that's what I knew of. I didn't even know there was hand pieces yet. But then, the story gets more complicated because, of course, American culture spreads, especially once, well, in all ways it spreads, whether you're talking about music or movies, but in gem cutting as well. We invented the idea of the lapidary club. England picked that idea up pretty quickly, like within 10 years. And then from England, you've got lapidary clubs spreading into Australia, spreading into Canada, also from America spreading into Canada. And so when we look at like the British story of hobbyists, they've got the same thing we do. They've got Mast machines mostly from us, and they've got this idea of lapidary clubs from us. And then I think probably once the internet starts, then you've just got all these pieces moving around. But even before that, the first handpiece like this is based on a 60s handpiece from Japan. So that handpiece was also getting exported to different parts of the world. And you can see it in Lapidary Journal. If you look back, in the 60s and 70s, you see the Imahashi in there. It's just another one of the many.
Imahashi was really, in the day, they were such a dominant player.
Yeah. And I'm not sure where Imahashi sits now, but of course, when we look at the American, I mean, just looking at the people in the chat, like what percentage of people use those machines, like maybe 5%.
Right.
Or, I guess we've got 65 people in here. So 2 out of 60 are handpiece users. So it's pretty low.
So what's this? So handpiece, if we now look at production cutting, where speed, productivity, and also ramp time for a cutter, because like somebody in Thailand, they're probably not, I mean, what's the ramp time for getting somebody up to speed as being a decent cutter? Like, take your own factory.
They've told me that they start people as polishers because you can do less damage that way as if you're learning. I think it takes them about a year to be a good polisher, and then another year or two to become a really good cutter. So once you're at like year 3, and not everyone does that. Some people just stay as polishers. It really depends on the personality and temperament and the desire of the person. But if someone wanted to go from polishing to cutting, by the end of the 3rd year, they would basically know most of the skills in the shop. They do, because they would have learned dopping, and then maybe the highest level person would end up becoming like a preformer, because that's the actual money job, where if you mess up, you're losing yield or you're losing color. So there's usually only one person in each factory that is a preformer, and that guy is doing the sawing as well. So he's looking at rough and sawing and making those important money decisions.
Yeah.
But like the thing about all of these types of questions, we would love to just say, oh, the tech this, the tech that, the tech this, but it's never about the tech. Like, the tech enables things to happen, but the reason why I'm using this machine now is because somebody at one point took it to Sri Lanka, and that was the first time they'd seen like a motorized machine, and they were so against it. Like the elder cutter generation of Sri Lanka, this is like 1979. They were like, no way, this is going to destroy the yield. We're going to lose the stone. The polishing's not going to work that well. They were scared of the motor, because before they were hand cranking. Everything was still hand crank. And basically it took the government to come in and start a school using these machines. And I think 2 generations went through before the old cutters were ready to retire. And that's what it took for them to change over to this. So that one wasn't about the tech. It was about the government helping, like the cutting community would not have done that otherwise. And I think,
well, I mean, what you bring up there is good. Like, Everclean, like our centrifuge, works marvelously. There's still people that I'm like, they will not do it. They're still, that's a newfangled thing. Give me the bucket with some paper bags. They're not, they're late adopters at best. So, I mean, that's a very fascinating kind of conversation. I think one of the things we want to get into here is, you'd set up to kind of show handpiece polishing, because I think you've done most of the fastening. Most of the fastening work's done on this.
Yeah. So yeah, we can do some show and tell here. So this is a sunstone. This is a stone that my customer sent me last week, and let me see if I can show you what it looks like right now. So we got.
Ooh, there we go. Yeah, that's working.
So it's you can see the stripes in there, if it'll focus. There we go.
Yep.
The stripes in there, that's the schiller, the copper inside the sunstone. So that's in there. And then you can see a bunch of triangles that I put all across the pair. So as I turn it around, hopefully light will catch it in different ways.
Yep.
But there's basically a bunch of triangles all over that. And they're all in, they're just cut in. So there's no polishing done. And probably with no reference, you can't really tell on there. I'm all foggy. There we go. They look all frosted, but without a reference, you can't really tell. But so as I'm doing this, so I did this all improvised. So there's no diagram, there's no design. So my map is this is my map that I've come up with. So I drew the shape, and then I'm writing down each of the facet spots. So as I rotate this around all the different indexes, every time I stop and cut a facet, I got to remember where that is. Otherwise, I won't be able to go back and polish it. So that's my map. It's telling me how I've rotated the stone around with this gear, and also how my angle is with the angle thing. So I cut it on one of these. These are the cutting laps. So this has diamond powder in it already. This is a diamond centered cutting lap. So I cut it, the whole thing with that. And now I've got like a tin lead lap here that has diamond powder on it that I've put on myself. So the diamond powder, I mix it myself. So this is what it looks like. It starts out as just this sort of, it's just powder. It doesn't look like anything. It just looks like flour basically. But you mix it with oil, and now it becomes like a slurry. Yeah. So it's like a creamy gel or whatever, like creamy. So then I've got that on here and I've got it on 2 different grits. So this is like a pre-polishing ring. And I think you can see on the video, there's
You
like
can
a
see
lighter
the color
area.
difference.
Yeah, so there's 2 areas. So this is like my pre-polishing area. So that's allowing me to take the skin off, this frosty skin will come off. And then once I do that, then I move to the inside ring, and that's what really gives it the shine and takes all the scratches out. So to set my machine up like this is a little bit non-traditional to have 2 rings like that. I mean, some people do it, but many people don't. So in order to do this, I need to have 2 different paper towels over here on my leg so that when I go from one to one, I don't cross over and contaminate.
Cross contamination.
Exactly. So cross contamination is our enemy, and we don't want that. And it seems, I think for any cutter that watches this, it seems a little bit maybe wild to put them so close together, but I've never had a problem with cross contamination. It's not ever been an issue. Okay, so what I'm doing, I'm changing my settings, and I'm basically looking at my map over here so I can remember what I was doing, because I did this yesterday. So the whole stone, it's a pear shape, so the whole stone's symmetrical. So everything that I do on one side, which for this first facet, it's 12 off the middle. So 12 to the left, and then I'll do 12 to the right. So that's just 2 different numbers. And so I'll do that one quickly and just show you how different the luster looks. So already, can you see that little black greasy mark on there?
Go a little closer.
I'll show you with the loop. So I just did one quick touch. That tells me if I've found my, whoops, I had it.
I think
There
we
it
can
goes.
just,
See that?
yeah, we see it.
So that's the grease. That's the diamond.
Mhm.
Whoops, that's the diamond powder grease. So I just gave it a quick touch, and then it outlines my whole facet. So then I know, okay, I have gone back to the correct settings. So give it a couple seconds, wipe it off. And I'm looking to see if the whole facet's polished, which it wasn't. So, okay, as soon as the skin is off, it doesn't look frosty anymore. I give it a good wipe off so I don't contaminate, and then I go to the inside ring, a couple more seconds, give it a wipe off, and I need a few more because it wasn't totally scratch free. And just in those, whatever, 4 or 5 seconds that I just did, it's polished. And now you're going to see a big difference between what's polished and what's not. So where am I? Hold on, let me angle it in a different way for you. Yes, okay. So where's that facet? Yeah, right.
You can kind of see it. You're coming in and out. Yeah, I can see it.
So it's the back one.
Yep.
And hold on, let me angle it.
A little hard to see the difference because we're coming in as an angle.
Yeah, I'll try to make it better. Okay, now you can definitely tell.
Yes.
Notice how that one is like glassy. It shines. So that's the polished one. And now all the rest of them need to get polished. So that's as quick as that's as long as it takes. It's like, just literally 5 seconds. And then you go to the next one, couple seconds, give it a look, couple more seconds because there's still some skin. And the cats are getting very excited. They like to sit here and watch me. I'm cat sitting for a couple of weeks, and the cats have never seen this before. Maybe like many people in the webinar, they've never seen this before, and they're just like, what are you doing? Yeah. So that's 2 done. So I did this stone yesterday. It started as rough. I did it on a live stream on YouTube, and I looked this morning, and that was like a 1-hour video. So it took me 1 hour to shape the stone, remove the inclusions, make it smaller because it was too thin. So there was a lot of stuff I had to do to this stone to get it to this point, and then attach it and then cut all the facets. That took all 1 hour. Now probably if I was going to sit here and polish the whole top, I think it would take me about 20 minutes. There's not that many facets on this one.
Yep.
And then I would flip it over and it would probably take me another hour, hour and a half. So total, like something around 3 hours usually.
Yep.
Though
Yep.
if the design is more simple, then maybe it'll be faster. Okay, so now I have 2 polished. And
Oh yeah, you can see. Yep. So that's you can see that. There you go.
yeah, there's one.
There's a reflection.
And then let me see if I can show the other one too. It's a little tricky, but yeah. And there's
There you go. You're kind of coming in on it.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, there's 2 back there. So okay.
Yep.
You don't need to do too much of that, but you can get the idea. If my camera will focus again, come back.
Yep.
I can.
Sometimes mine does the exact same thing. When I'm doing that live streaming rock selling that we do Friday nights, sometimes the camera okay, there you go.
Yeah,
You're back.
I just reset it. So we don't need to go through all the faceting, but you can kind of see, or I could do one more. I'll do the table, because the table, that's a big one. It's pretty easy to see.
Yep.
It's also usually it's the hardest one. So
now let me ask you a question. Like, so when you're there and you're setting your height.
Yeah, with this
so
thing.
are you doing that and just so you're like, okay, you're just turning it to where you get contact.
Exactly. So for instance, on the table, what I'm going to do, I'm going to lift it up, because the table is a lot high. You know, the table, the thing has to be a lot higher because the stone's so tall. So I lift this up. So now the handpiece isn't touching, nothing's touching. So I know if this is on 0 and these 3 feet are on this plate, it's perfectly at 0. If I come down, okay, for instance, I'll come down and it's touching, that's 0 still. But if I keep on going down, I think you can see maybe the handpiece is tilting down.
Yes, you can still,
And now there's this 3rd foot is like totally floating in the air. So that's like one of the mistakes that the new cutter has to make. They're going to always make that mistake because they're not understanding totally what they're doing at first. And so we have to kind of tell them, you have to pay extra special attention, because we want them to be aware of that, because after they are aware of that, then it becomes a tool, because we actually use that now. So for instance, I just polished 2 triangles, but let's say one of my triangles wasn't totally down to the girdle. You know, it's like too high up and it needs to come down. I can just, as I'm polishing, I can just lower the plate maybe half a turn or whatever, and it will lower the handpiece slightly, and that will actually change the angle, change the geometry. And so by using this, and this being so easy to move right here, as I'm working on this design, and this will definitely happen, I do it on every stone, I change the angles as I polish to make all the meet points perfectly meet up. Or sometimes if I'm improvising like this, there's a couple facets that aren't at the right angle, but I just left them there because they're pretty close, and I will just adjust them while polishing. It's faster that way, and it's easier to control what you're doing. So we have to teach them how to understand what's going to make the worst mistake, which is going too low, because it's intuitive. It sort of seems intuitive that, oh, I want to cut the facet bigger, so I'm going to go lower. But that's not exactly how it works. You can go too low and then you're just changing your angle and you have no idea what you're doing. So we want them to know that can happen, but then we want them to know, okay, now we're going to use that thing to help us go faster and to tweak and everything else. So it's fun. To me, that's
and is this part of like the ability to tweak that? Is that also part of what has this be what people tend to use in production cutting environments more, because you can make those tweaks kind of on the fly?
Sort of. Again, I want to emphasize there's a cultural thing that's been happening. So it's not like Sri Lanka saw the Ultratech and we're like, nah, we're not going to use that. That never happened.
Right. Because Ultratech is super cool.
Right. Or I mean, any of those Mast machines, like they just never saw them. But for me, having used both, I will say this thing is so much faster than any American faceting machine I've used. I started cutting on a polymetric. I mean, the first real one that I owned. And so the polymetric, I wish I had a photo of it, but it's an arm, right? There's an arm here on here, and the knob is all the way up here. or no, sorry, it's all the way, it's down here. So I'm holding the arm like this, and then I'm doing this. So I'm constantly cutting cross-handed, and it's really slow. Like, it's not insanely slow, but to the way that I'm wielding this, it's so much more fluid and fast, and it's right where my hand wants to sit. There's no cross-handedness. And the Ultratech is even more different, because the Ultratech, the knob is up here. So you're like doing this, and you're going up and down, and whatever. There is some ergonomics here that I think actually are really beneficial, because your hands are just in a very comfortable position. They're not like in weird places.
One of the things that strikes me, and we've got a bunch of questions we're going to answer here as well. One of the things that strikes me is some of the machines that we've done and we've brought to the market are actually inspired from machines that we found in China that would never have made the light of day. Like, for instance, the production trim saw we make. It's this wicked, crazy fast trim saw. And nobody does a trim saw that's that insanely fast and industrial. It's like a horse, or I think it's a horse or a horse and a half motor in the thing. I forget exactly, but it's like ridiculously heavy duty. But if you're in a production, and say you're preforming for beads or things like that, you're never going to use a normal trim saw. And when we were then living in the trim, the production cutting environments, there's a lot of stuff that they're pragmatists, like the Chinese, Sri Lankans, Thai, they're practical. They're like, I need to make this thing work. And we learned a great deal out of being there and seeing that sometimes the coolest tech is not necessarily the fastest tech.
Right. And I would say that is exactly true for the faceting. I mean, I think I know some really fast American cutters who, can cut stones, a 1 carat stone in less than an hour. And I know handpiece cutters that can cut those same size stones in about the same time. I think for the highest level, it doesn't actually matter. But most people are not at the highest level. They're either beginners or they're intermediate. And so, to me, it really depends, though, on what's your goal. And because people ask me a lot about this question of the handpiece versus the mast. And I tend to just say, well, are you trying to be a commercial cutter? Do you want to make a living as a cutter? Or are you more of either an artist or competition type person? Because if you're doing the competition, just get the American machine. That's what it's made for. It's not meant to, it's not necessarily meant to go fast. It's meant to be perfect. This one, not meant to be perfect. It's not perfect. We tell that to the students on the first day. It's not perfect, but we're going to teach you how to work with it so that the stones will be perfect. The machine doesn't matter at some point.
Right. And for some of the machines, like you think about some of the work that John Dyer does. I mean, that's friggin' out there stuff. That's ultra.
That stuff needs, a concave cutting needs perfection. Like you can't, or any of the super symmetrical complex designs, I mean, you can see in the market that those designs don't exist for the commercial world. Like, they take too long to cut, and if you don't execute them perfectly, they look really wonky and weird. And a lot of the types of cuts that we see people doing for competitions are specifically made to be complicated and challenging, which is the opposite of the commercial cutter would love to do emerald cuts all day. It's like the easiest cut. It's very simple, it's fast, but it's
your
not
profitability is probably a lot higher on those. Or you can do a lot more too.
But it's not as dazzling, I guess. And also, I mean, it's not that challenging. It's easy. It's fast. That's partially why it works. So,
well, a couple questions we got. Ron just wanted to cover, I want to make sure we cover, talk about your online classes and what people can do with you.
Okay, so the online classes, this was born out of the COVID pandemic experience. So we started to do these sort of Zoom-based classes. So it'd be kind of like this, like as if, Sherman, you were trying to learn faceting for me, and you had your machine there and I had my machine here. We did that for like 6 months, and it was okay, but I would say that's inadequate because I can't see what you're doing, and so I can't critique it, and it's not very helpful. So what I decided to do from that experience was like, okay, well, I know that people do want to cut at home. I know some people won't come to the school, or they can't even come to a lapidary club because they're not by one. So what would they want to have? What would be useful? for me personally, I think learning cutting from a book is very hard and not the best way, because
Mhm.
when I show people what to do, it's very simple and fast, and they learn it in a couple of weeks. You know, they're good in a couple of weeks. And we can see that people that are learning from the internet and from books, it's like, and myself is part of that, it took a couple of years to figure out what was going on. So I thought, okay, well, could we take the live experience and translate that into a video? So I've got 4 cameras, so you can see me talking, you can see what I'm doing like this, but I also have this macro camera. So every time I do anything, I show the super zoomed in, but it's not all shaky and, you know, like this one, it's nice. And then I've got a camera just for the tool area. So you're getting all these really beautiful shots, good lighting, good audio, and then my normal presentation from the class. So every class video is like another project. So learning how to do the round brilliant, doing how to do the hand shaping, learning how to do the mix cut and the step cut, and, you know, going through all the cuts. We've got a lot of classes that aren't up yet. Like I've shot 16 classes and only 4 are up because I've been on the road for all year and I just cannot edit them. But there's a lot of classes coming. But so the idea
I know somebody
is,
who's got video editing capability.
okay, well, okay, that is a good idea. I have been thinking about hiring an editor for that. So maybe we can do a collab. That would be pretty cool. But the idea is, there's 2 ideas. One, maybe some people are never going to come to the school because either they don't want to or they can't afford it. So the video course is much cheaper because I'm not there.
Right.
So, you know, there's no feedback. But of course, people can send in questions and photos, and there's a forum on there for it. But then also the other idea, this was really from what I wanted to do, was we can only do so much in 2 weeks, and making the class longer becomes extremely expensive for all of us. So the advanced classes that I always dreamed about doing, we thought, well, we could do that as a video, and then anybody who's already taken our 2-week course would still benefit from these advanced classes. Take whichever one you want. Maybe you want to learn how to cut emeralds. We have an emerald cutting class. Maybe you want to learn how to use Gem Cut Studio. We have that class. All the things that you would think about learning, we've made a class for that, but we didn't teach that stuff in our school. So it's also a bonus for, I mean, it's not a bonus, you have to pay, but, you know, it's a way to keep going if you've already done our in-person school. So
no, well, that's great. So do we have a link for, you know, like, where would they find out more information about this, Justin? Like these, you know, I know some of them are in formulation, and we can talk about collaboration there. I'd be very keen on that.
The website is called Faceting Apprentice. So that's what the school is called, facetingapprentice.com. So when you go on there, you're going to see at the top, there's in-person classes and there's online classes. And so the online classes are the videos that we're talking about.
Okay.
We are going to do, we've done in-person classes too, but I think right now in the next year, life is looking really crazy for us because we're getting ready to move across the world. So I don't think we're going to have a lot of classes next year, probably not more than 1, I would imagine, because we're
Nermeen just put that in the Faceting Apprentice and the link in the chat. So
perfect.
So you can look at that. I'm certainly very interested in studying with you because I think it'd be great to learn. So hopefully, Ron, that gives you some good information. And Ron also asked a question about digital, like Mast on digital. I think you actually really touched on that. Like, digital is cool, especially for certain types of cutting. Like you said, like the competition cutting, people tend to like it, and it does give them a certainty, right?
Well, let me say something slightly controversial, and I'm not the first person to say this, but, you know, what I've seen, like the digital, I can't remember what year that came out, but I think it must have been pretty close to the time that I started faceting. So like I started watching a lot more people switch over to the digital machine. And basically, personally, and I'm saying this as someone who owns a digital machine at home, I think I don't believe in the digital machine. I think it's doing something negative to people. People are and I'm saying this also from someone that sold a bunch of laps last year. People are becoming really obsessed that everything must be perfect. It has to be perfect to the 0.00001. The lap has to be perfect. The meter must be perfect. You know, like, from my point of view, and this is the minority point of view, I guess, if everything about the machine must be perfect for you to make your stone, there's something wrong with that equation, because the machine cannot stay perfect. Using it makes it not perfect, right? It gets old, it gets beat up and banged up and full of diamond powder. And to me, I just think the more simple the machine is, the longer it's going to last because it doesn't have all these sort of moving parts and complicated circuitry. But also, you're going to have to be a better cutter. And this is exactly how we approach in our school. It's like, we're not using the perfect machine. We want you to become the interface, right? It's not about the machine cutting. Otherwise, you can get a computer to do that, and that's real. But we don't want that. We want to do it ourselves. We want to have our own blood and sweat and tears, and hopefully less blood than sweat. But
no, I get the metaphor. Well, I love what you're saying there. One of the things that we oftentimes find, people will buy a machine from us, and there's something that they perceive as like a blemish on the machine, or something's not right. Like, they're going to cut rock. Oh, there's this, the powder coat doesn't look quite perfect. And they'll be so obsessed with that thing, they never cut their first rock. Like, I have to work them through this like attachment to everything has to be perfect before I take step one. And that's really, I think it's a cultural ailment. Like, here, like this pursuit of perfection actually ceases people from moving forward on their dreams a lot of times.
Yeah. And I would say that is a modern, that's such a modern thing, because if we go back, the period that I'm looking at this year, 1930s, everybody's building machines in their basement out of scrap.
Yes.
Extra stuff. Like, oh, I have this old motor and I've got this old, grinding thing, and I'm going to just like get a piece of wood and like put some stuff on it. I'm going to get like some old jeans and staple it to the wood and put some corundum powder, and like that's what they were doing. It was all rickety, and I'm sure it was all wobbly, and like they were faceting stones that way, and they did not care that the machine was not perfect, because of course they built it. It was as good as they would do, and everybody just cut their stones anyway. And
well,
I mean, if
a lot of the old machines, we make replacement parts for machines going back to the 1940s, even though there never were a Highland Park machine. They're like this machine or that machine, I mean, all kinds of different brands, and we just do it because we love the machines. But those machines were not perfect. Like, even all the old Highland Park machines were all hand fitted, so even interchangeable on parts is a nightmare. Like the vice jaw, you may need to file a little bit, because the original Highland Parks were all hand done. There was no CNC, there's no consistency. They were fitted together as one machine, which was, they just got it done. They were not all fixated with the kind of cookie cutter type of thing. And a lot of times we work with our customers like, look, bring some creativity and elbow grease into what you're doing. And that's part of where I like when you showed me the hand piece faceting, I'm like, to me, that feels very accessible, like as a new person, because I feel like
it's a hand tool.
Like, it's a hand tool. Like,
I mean, if you've used a drill, it's, same category.
Same category. Matthew had a question. How much of the stone is sacrificed to cutting or grinding? Do you pick a certain design to better suit the natural shape of the stone? Or is the choice more of an artistic matter? It's a great question.
That's a really good question. And that really goes right to the heart of what our job is to do. So there's two different approaches, but I'll just go with the one that's like sort of the industry normal. So if you're buying stones and that's a business, and then you're going to sell them or whatever, of course you don't want to lose more stone than you need to. So whatever your piece of rough is, let me just grab a couple pieces real quick. But whatever your piece of rough is, you want to make sure that your design is fitting into that shape and not vice versa, because we want to keep the rough. So here's a bunch of sunstones, and let's just look at a couple of examples. So here, we don't need to see it up close, but just to know, it's a square shape, right? It's fairly square, versus this one is like sort of a triangular blob. So I'm probably not going to make a square into an oval or a pear shaped, unless I have to for inclusions or something. A square should become a square, or a rectangle. A triangle should become a triangle. If it's long and ovular, then it should be an oval or a cushion. So we start with that. Okay, look at the shape. Once you know where the front of the stone is, where the face is going to be, look at the shape and see what it is. Sometimes it doesn't look like anything. I mean, some of these, this one that triangular one, it could be a triangle, but maybe because of the inclusions, it could be an oval or a cushion or even like an emerald cut. I don't know, depending on, you know, what we see. So we have to work with the natural shape and figure out what we can turn it into that's the best for that stone. And then we have to figure out what kind of faceting pattern is going to benefit that material. So for instance, on the Sunstone, it's pretty light. I would like to maybe increase the color saturation as much as possible. It also has kind of a low RI. So I could go with something brilliant, but maybe the Sunstone can't be that brilliant. So, and it doesn't, this particular piece is pretty yellow and doesn't have a lot of schiller in it. So maybe I would just try to enhance the yellow as much as I can by using something like a step cut, or, you know, there's a lot of different options for cuts designs. But
well, and this stuff, like this gets back to your book. So a lot of all these different types of cuts you're talking about, a lot of this is in this reference book that you've created here.
Right.
Because like, as I'm going through here, like the language that you're speaking now, because I have this book, I'm able to track with you a lot more and like, oh yeah, I saw that, like the connection. So,
yeah, and that was the idea with the book. It was like, I spent 6 years going around the world and meeting cutters from all over Europe and Asia and America, and then seeing, oh, you know, like the Germans have this one cut that nobody else does, but it's really good for a couple things. And the Thais and the Indians and the Americans, everybody has a couple of cuts, but nobody has all the cuts, right? Nobody knows all those cuts.
Yeah.
And nobody sort of has ever systematically looked and said, oh, well, this cut works good for this one thing specifically, and this one is for this, and this one's for that. And so my thought was, if you could just learn all of those cuts, which are all industry standard cuts that jewelers like, you would pick up the Sunstone or whatever stone it is, and you pretty much instantly know exactly what kind of design it should get, because you know you want to get a certain shape because of the rough, you know you want to get a certain, let's say, color saturation versus brilliance, somewhere on that spectrum, and then you know what to do. So then to finish answering that question, then how much is lost? It really depends on a few things. First of all, is the shape already really nice? You know, this one, it's kind of squarish, but it's also kind of rounded. There's this extra little thing out over here that has to come off. There's a bunch of inclusions over on this side. You can see there's like a black area on there. So this one's going to lose more. It's got a bunch of crud in it, and it's got a bunch of extra bits. So this one will lose more. So usually we like to aim, or we don't aim, but we aim for the highest we can get. But 30% is a pretty realistic expectation. So if this is 10 carats, you're going to get 3. The best I've ever gotten is about 61% on an emerald, because some of the emeralds they're perfectly rectangular with the corners already broken off. So you're literally, you know, you think about the emerald cut, you're literally just following the shape of the outline, and then you're literally just faceting facets on the crystal edges, and you don't change it too much, but you're still going to lose 40%, 50% of the stone, best case scenario. So somewhere 30 to 50% yield is realistic. Closer to 30.
A question from Howard here. He says, what is the oil that you're using to make the slurry when you're showing that slurry?
Normally it's Singer oil. This is just sewing machine oil. I don't know what this brand is. That's just what they had, but it's sewing machine oil. I like that one because it has no smell. It doesn't go bad.
James Joel on YouTube asked, I would like to buy just the handheld fastener without the machine. Can you go about doing that?
Yeah, they sell this. I think it must be about $350. You can order it directly from them. It's the company's called Sterling with an E. You can buy the whole machine, or you can buy this. I've bought these separately before because sometimes it's nice to have an extra handpiece. You know, you can do two at once, two different projects at once. So I got my daytime and my nighttime stone or whatever. Or if you're doing matched pairs, sometimes it's really handy to just have 2. So I've bought them individually.
Okay. Ron had a question. My problem was when I change laps, I end up with a very slightly different angle and have to search to find the correct angle to polish. Thoughts on that?
That happens to me all the time. The secret is get really good at finding the second angle. Usually for me, well, if it's extreme, like if you're polishing and polishing and polishing and you're watching then there's something wrong with your laps. One of your laps is not flat, extremely not flat. For me, maybe the first 1 second of touching the pre-polish makes it flat. So I always leave gaps in between my facets when I'm faceting, because I know in the polishing, everything's going to even out and come together, and then I make them all meet up. So once you know your laps and you know how much space it's going to take to make them flat, then you know how much space to leave in between the facet junctions when you're cutting. And that comes with knowing your gear.
Yeah.
So.
And Randy had asked the question, what brand of faceting? That's a Sterling machine there. So
Sterling,
you're
yes.
gonna have some Sterlings at Tucson show?
Yep, they actually just came in 2 days ago, so they have arrived. For sure we're going to have them unless we can't get them out of customs. But yeah, I think we've got 6, and we're going to have the machine with the handpiece with a kit that has all of the accessories over here, plus not these laps, but some cutting laps. And I think we're even going to put a polishing lap in there, and it's going to be, I don't know how much, but I think less than 3,000 for the whole everything.
I may be talking to you as well, because I like that.
You can get one.
Yeah, exactly. And we're going to hook up in Tucson. I mean, we'll have to get our schedules kind of synchronized there. Matt, I had a question. Matthew had a question. Do you go out and try to collect your own specimens ever? And if so, what?
I don't normally do that. I've been to a lot of mines this year, and I learned pretty quickly that is not for me. I can sit here for 10, 12 hours, but going out to the mine and digging around in the dirt, like after an hour, I'm just like, yeah, I'm basically over this.
Yeah,
so
you're
for
done.
me, and you know, when I first moved to Bangkok and I was starting to meet the guys in the factory, I would ask them the same thing, like, do you guys go to Africa and like get all this rough? And they're just like, no, you know, like, then you have to take out a month of work. You're going to get malaria. You have to buy a hotel. You're going to get robbed. You know, all this crazy stuff's going to happen. Like, I'm just trying to get some stone. So for me, you know, I don't do that. I just go to rough dealers, you know, like people in Tucson mostly. And, you know, you find the rough dealer, and then basically
I'm surely you've been in Hong Kong. You've probably been in some of the stone market in Hong Kong.
No, I've been to Hong Kong just for the Hong Kong show, but I've never been to any of the local markets.
So the next time you're over there, we will take you there, because we have all kinds of different places we go. Now, we don't deal in a lot of the really, you know, faceting grade stuff, but it's ridiculous. Some of the places are just, we've actually had this idea of doing like an Asia lapidary or gemstone, like people who want to go see this, because we're in and out of all those like little weird markets in Indonesia and other places, because we buy a lot. We buy a lot of material.
Cool. We should do something like that when I get back to Bangkok, and just go through the Jewelry Trade Center building, because that building is like, it's eye candy. You know, there's rough and faceted stones everywhere. But the problem is that most of the rough that you can find I mean, I don't know about in Hong Kong, but in Bangkok, there's tons of rough dealers, but all of the rough sucks. Like, it's small, or it's included, or it doesn't have good color. You know. Or it's really
we have
expensive.
some good connections inside China. So some of the folks we know they're doing some of the big brand stuff over there, and they've got crazy wealth. So they tend to get really good material. And if we can get their scraps, we're getting freaking top grade stuff.
Yeah.
Larry said, it seems that often it's less expensive to purchase poorly cut factory stones than to purchase rough that might be clean or might not. I've heard you say that it might be easier to recut a poorly cut stones using a handpiece. Mind touching on what that is?
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And that's actually something that we've been getting better at in Bangkok. Because in Bangkok, as I said, the quality of rough there is not very good. So we never buy it. But we have suddenly just sort of had a realization of like, oh, especially during COVID, everybody has cut stones there, because it's a cut stone marketplace, right? That's where people go to cut. So everybody has cut stones, and a lot of the cut stones are really badly cut. Like, they're cut for weight, they're windowed, they're ugly, but the material has already been clean. You know, it's clean material. You can see exactly what color it is. Or, I mean, you can see how clean it is, I guess. It's not always clean, but you can see what it is very easily. And then you can see how much it costs. And then as an experienced cutter, I know, okay, we're going to recut this. We're going to lose 20%. This is going to be the final weight. And then here's my adjusted price per carat. Can I sell it? And it's always yes, because prices in Bangkok are good. And prices during COVID were really good, because people were just like trying to move stuff. So we did
the same exact thing in spheres. Like we'll
Oh,
go and
really?
we'll buy lots of beautifully material, but rubbish cutting, like just terrible. And we just get them, throw them in a high-speed machine, and we'll take a ball that maybe we're paying, stupid, like $4 a kilo. And that
Yeah.
turns into be like $100 ball. I mean, we just
Well,
all day long because you
and
can
then
see it.
yeah, and then also for you, you don't have to spend so much time sawing it and sizing it because that step's kind of already been done,
Right.
almost seemingly for free. Like if you buy a already faceted stone, chances are you're not going to flip it upside down and make the table somewhere else. Like it's already been preformed for you. You know what you're going to do. You're just going to make it a little bit better. And then you can do all the calculations that way. There's almost no risk. I mean, sometimes stones do break or the color isn't what you thought once you recut it, but there's not a lot of huge surprises. It's a great way to really make money. But if you don't know how to recut, that's the problem. And I think a lot of cutters don't. And that's one
Have
of the
you thought
things that
about doing a recutting class?
well, we do recutting in our 2-week class. That's the final
Okay.
project. So
Okay.
we teach you 3 stones from rough because I figured if we're teaching people professional commercial cutting, they have to know recutting. Like that's an essential skill. And the secret to recutting is, I'm not going to tell you what it is because I want you to come to the class, but the secret to recutting is just to understand how to take the stone and put it back in the machine and perfectly line it up so that you're not wasting it, right? You want to just use what's already there. And then we're teaching you how to basically cut on top of what's already there to improve the angles and the polish and the meat points and everything else. It's awesome. I mean, if you check out my Instagram or my wife's Instagram, we have a lot of before and after recutting pictures.
Yeah.
And especially my wife, Victoria, she's the cutter as well, Victoria Reno. She loves doing the before and afters because it's so cool. Like you see this ugly stone, you see what it's turned into, you see the transformation of color, and we have the weight on the photo so you can see exactly what's happened.
Yeah.
That's
Hey,
to
Raina,
us
make
is
sure you get their Instagrams put up in the chat so people can grab those. And then somebody add her to me following her on my Instagram as well. That way I get the feed.
Yeah, she's good. She's really good.
I want to talk about the book again. So like
Okay,
this
like
book
that.
is, it's not cheap. I think it's $120.
Yeah.
It's $120 or something like that. Well worth it. Like this is the encyclopedia. I haven't seen anything quite like this. And when I think about that, like when I saw it, I'm like, damn. And then I got it. And it's like, this is a serious book. Like this will be around after I'm dead. That book's going to still be around because it's put together well. But as a reference guide, as well as the history, because you talk about the history of every single design in here, which I found really fascinating because a lot of people are disconnected from like, where did this come from? And before we went live, we were talking about, like, I love looking up the definition of words and what words meaning is the etymology of a word going way, way back. And sometimes you're surprised what they mean versus what the meaning has become today. And so likewise, you've really given this history in there. So I cannot speak highly enough about the book. Make sure, team, that you put that in the chat. And we got more questions. Can you go for a while longer?
Yeah. Oh,
Okay.
I'm good. Yeah, let's get some of those questions. I want to see
Jim
what they
Gilbert,
are.
my dear friend Jim's got a question. He says, where and how to draw the line between hobby and production cutting?
I guess that would probably just be intention. I mean, are you trying to make money? Or are you just having fun? And there's probably a whole gradation of that. Because I mean, some people I know are professional cutters part-time, and then they have a job. Like there's a girl in San Francisco, Michelle Mai, great example. She's a food scientist in the day. She's a gem cutter by night and weekend, and she sells stones. She makes money selling stones, but she's a scientist too. So I know a lot of scientists or a lot of gem cutters are scientists for some reason. I know a lot of scientist gem cutters, but I mean, for me, I cut stones and other stone cutting stuff 100% full time. So that's my whole income. So I'm a professional cutter, and I don't know. I mean, it's just what you want it to be. If you're making money, then that's a job, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's it.
Yep. Ron also had a question. In reading the description of your online class, it appears it's aimed at the Sterling machine. Would the online class also relate to Mast machines? Like with the principles, he's asking, can it
Yeah,
cover both?
that's a good question. It is everything in the class so far is on the Sterling machine. So there is going to, so if you're on an American machine, there's going to be some translation that you're going to have to do. And I mentioned it in the first class. But you know, as far as the techniques, they're essentially the same. Angles, indexes, rotation. So every machine has those three. Whatever way yours works, you're going to have to translate what I'm saying. There's only a couple things in the class that are going to be different, and it usually has to do with cutting the table, because on this machine you can just cut the table like this,
Right.
and on the American machine you need a 45-degree adapter, and things go in a different order. It's in my plan that we're going to do, you know, later a Mast version of the school, but that's so far away from getting made right now. But it is part of my goal, because I understand that people are using Mast machines. The problem is that I'm not, at this point, I'm not as good on the Mast machine, and I don't want to be the teacher of that class, because I'm not I have someone in mind who's already agreed to do this, but it's a professional cutter who uses Mast machines, and they're going to do the class with me as a video. So
Yeah.
okay, but again, that's a couple of years away, I think, because I got no time.
Okay, great. The book is this. This is from Arthur. The book is The Secret Teachings of Cutting: 50 Classic Gemstone Designs by Justin.
And I saw someone said, I don't see it on Amazon. You're not going to see it on Amazon. You have to go to our website to get it. We're doing everything ourselves. We made the book ourselves. We boxed them. Luckily, in the first round, I shipped them personally all myself. Now we are having help with this, but this is still very small. You know, just like you guys, you know, this is a small business, and it's just friends helping friends. So like, Amazon's not involved, and they're not getting paid. You know, we're just doing it ourselves. So, you know, support small business.
Oh yeah. Theodore said, do you ever add lube to a diamond?
To a diamond, maybe they mean to the diamond powder or to the stone.
Maybe.
Well,
put that in chat, Theodore, if you're there, so we can clarify that, just so we make sure we answer the right question.
I think what he's asking is, do we have to have lubrication for the polishing? In which case, diamond. Yes, and that's why we've mixed this already with oil and diamonds. So
with the sewing machine
lubricating. Oil. Yeah, with the sewing machine oil. So that's what's lubricating it in the polish. We need that.
And then Jesse was asking, how much does that whole setup you have there? You said it's around $3,000.
I think it's going to be around 3,000 when it, you know, all said and done. And that means all the shipping and the import duties and everything's been rolled into it. It's just like a finished deal. You're going to have to come to Tucson to find out, though, because I don't know the final price yet, because we don't know what the import duties are on all that stuff yet.
Yeah. In the future, there's people that I know that do a fair amount of importing. We know how to move containers of stuff, so we could collaborate.
Well, we can talk. Yeah.
Great Laura had a question. Powder grit set, powder versus grit set on the topper. Thoughts?
Powder versus grit set on the toppers. That is another strange
Maybe
question.
You can clarify that, Laura, in the chat if you're still there. Just clarify what do you mean? Like, what's the question? And then Theodore saying, clarifying, sometimes I do a graphite or other to the diamond paste. I add a graphite or something or other to the diamond paste.
No, I've never done that. Just oil and diamond, that works well for me. That's really the traditional way. So, yeah.
Okay.
I've never thought to
do that. And then where are you going to be in Tucson? Do you know? Laura had a question about that as well.
I'm going to be in the Pueblo show. Starting about January 28th, I think. I'm in the same room as Matthew Milstead and Meg Berry. So look for Matthew Milstead. His name's on the door. But I'm sure I'll be blasting social media in the weeks leading up to it. So I'll be there for about 2 weeks, and we're gonna have machines and books and shirts and stones. Sadly, no laps, because the Russian thing, we can't get the laps anymore. But we're going to have other goodies. We're going to have a bunch of fastening machines set up as well. So if you want to come and try it, play with it, it's going to be like a fastening party. Yeah, we want it to be a party. So come party with us.
We'll be there. Larry had a question. I still don't understand how to void the transfer jig and center it by hand without having to completely tweak every facet?
Okay, that is a good question, and I've been making a spectacle of this. So the other big difference, I said the one big difference of this one is the cutting the table. You need that adapter. But the other big difference, at least in my technique, is I'm skipping the step that a lot of the American cutters do, where when you finish the stone, you take it out and you put it into this jig and it holds the stone, and then you have another dop and you glue them together and you go through this whole process of flipping it over. And it takes a while. Like, I mean, it takes more than 5 minutes, which to me is too long. So for me, what I do, I take the stone off completely. So it's no longer on the dop at all. It's just loose. I've got a flat dop. So this one is just, it's got a flat end.
Yep.
And I put some super glue on here and I literally just stick the stone on top of there. And I look at it on all the sides and I make sure it's in the middle. And then it's done. The first time that my wife showed me this, the first time that she showed me that, I was like, no way, that's not good. Like, that's not going to work. And she was like, I've been doing this for 10 years, you know, like, you don't know what you're talking about. And now,
well, let's also be clear for people that don't know, his wife is like serious production cutter.
She is a really, really good cutter. So now I've gotten to the point where I've been doing that now for years, and it's just so easy. And so, but the only trick is, okay, so you center it by eye, but how do you know how perfect it is? Again, it doesn't matter, right? Like, it only matters if you have to conform to the rigid thing of the machine. So for me, I center it as much as I can. Sometimes it's dead perfect, and sometimes, I don't know, like I walked away and it slid over to the side and it's way off, and I'm just like, I'll still go for that. And so then the only trick is how to position it so that it's lined up correctly with the index gear. And that is just through a little bit of trial. We just cut, you know, you do it by eye, and then you cut a little bit and you can see if the girdles are mismatched or whatever. And I don't know. It's not very hard, though. I know that it sounds hard because I thought the first time I saw this, I was like, this is like an impossible trick. But now to me, I do it in 5 seconds. It's so easy. The only thing that can go wrong, and this has happened to me before, if somehow there's like an air bubble in the glue and the stone is tilted, you know, it's not totally flat, that does cause a problem, because then the girdle can't line up. But that rarely ever happens. I mean, if you just push it into the glue, it's fine. And then, so then the mental hurdle of the Mast cutter is like, oh, I can't cut every facet to the same without moving the height up and down. And that's true. You know, if you're cutting around brilliant and you need to cut 8 mains, if your stone's not centered, you can still cut it just fine. You just have to make the Mast go up and down a little bit, which is why I'm doing this all the time. It's just part of my technique now. But I think for the American cutters, they're not used to that. But if that seems like a mental challenge for you, just put it out, because like, as soon as you stop doing round stones, you have to do that anyway. You know, if you do an oval or an emerald cut or whatever, some sides higher, some sides lower, you're constantly having to go up and down. So just put it away. You know, it's a void thought. Just forget about that. And you can visually confirm that the girdle is even all the way around by eye. And I do that on every stone. So to me, it's normal.
We just got 7 more questions that just rolled in here.
Okay, 70 more minutes.
We'll take a few more here. Okay. Theodore says, are they 6 or 8 inch laps / so you cut the crown first? I think we're asking 2 questions there, Theodore. So you were talking about the laps. Laps are not available. Some of the laps you had come out of Russia, not available right now.
Right. So this machine can take 6 inch or 8 inch. I just happen to have a bunch of 6 inch laps because they're cheaper, but like I have 8 inch laps at home that I use. So and the ones that we sold also can be 6 or 8 inch, though we have none. So yes, I think that answers that question. What was the other part of that question?
So you cut the crown first?
I cut the crown first. So that's what makes the whole thing work. Cutting the crown first is another funny thing. It's another funny American thing. Or I mean, not cutting the crown first, I guess. Everyone in the world cuts the crown first. It doesn't matter what country you go to, except America. And then America, meaning all the other countries, all the other hobbyists that have taken American machines, like Australia and UK. Only Americans do it. And the reason why is, well, the fact that you need to use the table adapter means that you have to take the stone out of the handpiece or out of the machine and put it in the adapter, and you've lost all your indexes. Most people can't put it back. If you take the dop out and forget about the keyed dops, because that never existed until recently. So before, everybody was taking out their stone with no keyed dops or anything,
Right.
and cutting the table, and then thinking about putting it back in and perfectly aligning up all the facets. Really hard. Even for me, that's pretty hard.
Yeah.
So we don't want to do that. So we do it as the last thing. And then so you need to cut the table last, which means you have to cut the pavilion first. And then later, so that's how it started. And then later, when we get into the 80s and we get meat point faceting, then the technique says start with a culip point and build around the culip point. So then you build your girdle, you build your other facets, and then you flip it over and you use the girdle to build the crown. But well, I have, that's why. I don't want to have a commentary on that, but I have some opinions, but let's go to,
dude,
let's
I
keep
love
on
that
going.
you have opinions. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the thing
Well,
that makes the conversation.
if you
All right,
teach
on the
it-
chat, are you guys liking this? Like, I'm seeing everybody's hanging out here. Like, if you like this, put yes in the chat, because like it's rare to have these kinds of conversations. Everybody kind of works by themselves, and like what you're opening up and the points of view, I love this.
You know, it's really partially because of teaching. Teaching changed me as a gem cutter. I was a good gem cutter before we opened the school. I became a great gem cutter by teaching foundations for years and years, and not that many years, 3 years, but doing it every class, every time with so many students. Like, you have to get really good at dopping if you have to teach everyone to dop all the time. You have to get really good at centering the stone if you have to teach people how to do it over and over again, and then hand shaping and all that stuff. And then, of course, people always ask you all these questions, and then you start thinking about it, and then you go on forums and you ask people in other countries. And then now I have the opportunity of asking master cutters in all the countries and say, how do you do this thing that people keep asking me about? So now I'm becoming like a sort of an encyclopedia of worldly knowledge, I guess.
No, you've
Which is
done
why
some
I wrote that
awesome
book.
awesome stuff, dude. Laps. Who are the laps made by? I mean, there's different people that make laps.
Yeah, I'm mostly using gear loose laps for polishing, and then for cutting, it's the ones that we sold. So again, we're out of them. We're trying to figure that out. I don't have any recommendations for other cutting laps. I was using the topper laps before, the cheap ones. So
Ed says, what about using silicone oil extender fluid used in polishing cabochons with diamond paste instead of sewing machine oil, diamond powder?
I tried to do, so I don't exactly know what's in the cabochon mixture, but I did get one of those syringes recently because we were in Seattle on this trip, and I realized I had like lost my diamond powder or something, and I couldn't find any place to get any. So I went to a shop in Seattle and got this cabochon syringe stuff, and that did not work. I don't know what's in that, but for faceting, it doesn't work. It could be my problem. I don't know how to use it, but it didn't do anything. And for me, I mean, of course, you can get those gear loose sticks. You can get other kinds of sticks. You can get sprays. But I'm a fan of the traditional way, which is just mixing your own stuff. Then you can make your own mix, whatever thickness you like it. It's also much cheaper. I mean, this much diamond powder cost $1.
Yeah, it's not
this
that.
is 10 carats. This whole jar of oil also cost $1. Not to put down the gear loose sticks, but those are $13 plus shipping. And I was going through those one per month. This stuff's going to last. I mean, this will last me years. And this stuff lasts me at least a month. So that's $1 a month versus 12. And being in Bangkok, the gear loose sticks, it's not possible to get them because of shipping.
Right.
I just like mixing my own stuff. Then you can do whatever you want. But that's just me.
Ryan Ross says, do you have anything to press the diamond? Do you use anything to press the diamond into the lap when you're reloading a lap or loading a lap for the first time?
Yeah, I have a very special tool. I think it was developed over, I don't know, possibly a 400 million years.
The finger.
The articulated finger, master tool. No, I'm
Yeah.
just kidding. But yeah, I just do it with my finger. I think if you see those roller things, well, I have used ball bearings to do it as well, but you don't really need to. I think traditionally when you see people rolling it in, it's rolling it into copper for cutting, not for the polishing. And people still do that. I just don't use that kind of a lap for cutting. But I think when you use a copper lap for your like 600 grit cutting, you do need to embed the diamond into the thing. But for tin and pewter, like it's so soft, you literally just rub it in with your fingers and it's fine.
Right. Randy was asking, do you use a transfer jig?
Nope. I've been traveling for a year with this machine and I don't even have one with me.
Yep.
I don't use it at all.
All right. Laura had a clarification question. The diamond paste versus a lightning lap topper. I've never used.
I see. Yes, I have a lightning lap. I have it for only one reason. It's just to do emeralds with no oil, because that one, you know, you can just put water on it and it doesn't have any floating stuff. But I don't know, some people do like those, and I don't have a strong opinion about it one way or the other, but I just don't physically like how it feels to use those. Like they're have a weird texture and they're like plastic and they're sort of sliding, but also vibrating in this weird way that I don't know. It just feels really aggressive on the stones to me. So I don't use them. Also, I just love the metal ones. They work, you know, they work really well. And I guess I'm sort of turning into, I don't even know the word, like not a Luddite, but like an antiquarian, I guess. Like I'm a fascinating antiquarian. Like I love looking at what people were doing 100 years ago and then like doing that. Some of that stuff is outdated and you know, I don't do it, but like the lead lap, this is definitely an antiquated lap. You can't even get it anymore because of health code laws,
especially in California.
Yeah, it is. And don't tell anyone I'm here, you know, but it's great. I mean, I love this lap. It's like one of my all-time favorite laps I've ever used. I had to have it custom made because you can't even get them. So I don't know. I don't like, personally, I don't like really using any of the plastic or resin or things that look and feel like plastic. That they're not saying they're bad. It's just, that's not my thing.
Right.
I love the metal. Heavy metal.
Dale Belcher from Kansas says, are you relying on the table being flat to the end of the dop? You mentioned a bubble throwing things off. This is like, so when you flip it and if you have a bubble when you're flipping to.
Yeah, no, the table has to be flat to the dop, whether you're cutting the crown or the pavilion. Otherwise, it's going to be crooked. I mean, if the table's not flat to the dop when you cut the crown, you're just going to cut it flat, but you're going to lose some weight. So if you can get the flat part to be aligned already, you lose less weight. When you flip it over, it absolutely must be flat with the flat dop, but it's very easy to do that because it's flat and the dop's flat and they just do that. That's why we don't need the transfer block. And that's why that technique doesn't work when you cut pavilion first, because then you're putting a pavilion into a cone and that's not going to sit flat. I mean, you can't do that. It's not possible. So the transfer without the transfer block only works when you cut crown first.
Very cool. Well, we answered a lot of questions here, Justin. It is such a pleasure doing great questions from the team, and definitely like really appreciate you all asking good questions here. This is also going to really help people because our objective is to take this kind of stuff, get it up on YouTube. If you have not subscribed to YouTube, subscribe to our YouTube channel. That does two things. It drives the visibility of these videos up. So when people are searching for gemstone cutting or polishing, this shows up more frequently to them. So subscribe. So you can take a photo of, like, use your phone to scan that QR code there. Also in the link, there's there. Jeremy, the faceting machines are in process. There's actually some other machines coming out a little bit before that. We've got kind of a CNC auto slabber that's coming out, which I need because I want to slab a lot of stuff in production. So that'll come out probably a little bit earlier this year. But yes, we are working on those. And then if you like these webinars, please go to our Google review, give us a 5-star review. Tell people what you like about this. This really does make a difference, because this also has more people find this, and certainly makes us super happy, because, you know, obviously we're here to really give you value. We're not doing a constant pitch party, although I will say tomorrow night we're doing an insane rock sale. I'm actually got a lot of material, including some of the material that we sold through. If you can see that on the left-hand side, left top, that's that Malawi 1970s. I found another drum of it. So we are going to have that material available for you, as well as a bunch of other type of material too. And we're about ready to get into some more of John's secret stash that he's had for like 20 years. So definitely come and check that out. And then go to Justin's Facebook page, Instagram. Can you put that up? Definitely. I'm going to pitch the book again. Get the book. If you are a faceter, if you're interested in faceting, get Justin's book. It is the comprehensive encyclopedia of all the cuts and the history of the cuts, which is super, super relevant for you to really learn. And it has a reference. I'm really glad I bought this book, even before I've never faceted a stone before, but like having this, I'm getting the language and the confidence of, okay, what do I need to be thinking about, and what might I think about tackling? And I'm certainly very interested in studying with you, Justin. I think that would be super cool.
Thank you.
And so anyway, we really appreciate you being here this evening. And it's great to have all of you online with us. Next week, we're gotten some special things prepared for Thursday night. And that will be John and I going into some stuff, that answering a lot of questions, people asking about new products coming out, and he's going to be opening up the curtain on some of the stuff that is also in the works. So, if you want to get into some cool tech discussions and product discussions next week, we're going to be getting into that. So with everything else said, Justin, thank you so much, man. You're so generous. We're 8:31. You give us like an hour and a half of your time.
Well, thanks for having me. It's always fun to talk to you and to see what people are, you know, wondering about and thinking about. And I guess maybe the next time we'll talk, we'll maybe be in Tucson, right? In real
we should
life.
probably talk sooner about your video stuff.
Oh yeah, true. But
yeah, I mean, because that's stuff that I got capacity, so we may be able to actually move some of that stuff forward. And then next time will probably be, well, obviously face to face will be Tucson.
Yeah, and then you can be in my video, because I'm going to have my travel log going in Tucson,
Awesome.
meeting all the people, so you can come into my world.
Yeah, we are not showing at Tucson. We will be doing some special stuff around Tucson, but we're not going to be doing a booth at Tucson. We actually didn't do it the last 2 years. And our sales were higher than they ever were when we had Tucson, without us spending $70,000 on a booth. So we will be doing some stuff. And our philosophy with Tucson is, instead of spending the money with the vendors to do the booth, because for what we do, it's a machine, right? We're going to take what we would blow with the vendors and just give that all to our customers. Because our goal is to get more and more people pursuing their dreams in lapidary. And that takes knowledge from people like yourself, Justin. It takes the tools. So certainly really appreciate the collaboration here.
I'm looking forward to more. So
All
let's
right.
do it again sometime.
You betcha. Take care, dude. And take care, everybody. And we'll look forward to seeing you next week.
Okay. Well, I'll
right.
see you guys somewhere else sooner
yes.
or later.
Well, and we're going to do another webinar. We'll figure out some more stuff to do, dude.
Okay. Yeah, I'm into
All
that.
right.
Who knows
All
where
right.
I'll be next time.
We should do something when you're in Bangkok before
Yeah,
you guys
we
move
should,
back.
for sure. Yeah, we should.
I mean,
We
that
can
could be cool, because
do-
a lot of our customers have never been able to see that, and like being able to have exposure to those different environments, super cool.
Yeah,
I like this
that's a
idea of the
colorful-
lapidary tours.
Yeah, that's a colorful place to be. So
I love
we'll
Bangkok.
definitely do that.
And Phuket. I like Phuket too.
Yeah, true.
So, all right.
Okay.
Take care. All right.
Well, thanks, guys. See you later.
Thank you. Bye-bye.